Shadows in the Box. The night Lincoln fell. Picture it, Washington, D.C., on the balmy evening of the 14th of April, 1865. The air still hummed with the fragile hope of peace. Just 5 days earlier, General Robert E. Lee had laid down his sword at Appomattox, and the bloody Civil War, 4 long years of brother against brother, seemed finally at an end. The streets buzzed with celebration, bonfires lighting the night like stars fallen to earth. In the heart of it all, the President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, sought a moment of simple joy. Tall and weary, his face etched with the sorrows of a divided nation, he slipped into Ford's Theater with his wife, Mary Todd, and their young guests, Major Henry Rathbone and his fiancée, Clara Harris. The play that night? Asterisk. Our American Cousin Asterisk. A light-hearted comedy full of witty barbs and uproarious laughs. Little did they know, the real tragedy was scripted in the shadows. Across town, in the dim corners of a boarding house run by Mary Surratt, a devout Catholic widow with a son tangled in rebel whispers, John Wilkes Booth brooded like a storm about to break. At 26, Booth was no ordinary man. He was a star of the stage, handsome and magnetic, with a voice that could command a theater and eyes that burned with unquenchable fire. Born into Maryland's famous acting dynasty, he'd once thrilled crowds as Romeo and Othello, but Booth's heart beat for the Confederacy, a lost cause he'd sworn to avenge. Kidnapping Lincoln had been his first dream, to snatch the tyrant and trade him for Southern prisoners, breathing life back into the dying rebellion. That plot crumbled when Lincoln slipped their grasp. Now, with surrender's bitter taste in the air, Booth's fury twisted into something darker: murder. The South is avenged, he'd soon declare. He gathered his unlikely band of shadows: Lewis Powell, a hulking ex-soldier with a surgeon's steady hand and a killer's heart; George Atzerodt, a bumbling carriage maker prone to the bottle; David Harold, a pharmacist's apprentice eager for adventure; and others, like Mary's son John and a stagehand named Edmund Spangler, who held Booth's horse without asking why. They plotted not just one death, but a cascade. Lincoln, his Secretary of State William Seward, and even Vice President Andrew Johnson strike at the head, and the Union beast might fall. As the clock struck 10:15 p.m., the theater thrummed with laughter. Act 3, Scene 2. A punchline from the play's sharp-tongued heroine, delivered for maximum mirth. Booth, cloaked and calm as a panther, had slipped past the lax guards. The president's bodyguard, John Parker, had wandered off to a nearby saloon for a drink. He knew every creak of the floorboards, every cue of the script. Heart-pounding but step-silent, he barred the door to the presidential box from within. There sat Lincoln, leaning forward in his rocking chair, eyes alight with rare amusement, his long fingers steepled in thought. Mary beside him, Rathbone and Harris across. Booth drew his .44 caliber Derringer, a tiny, wicked thing, single shot and silent as sin, and pressed it to the back of Lincoln's skull. The bang was a muffled thunderclap, lost in the audience's roar. The president slumped forward, blood blooming dark against his white shirt, his breath a ragged whisper. Chaos erupted like a shattered mirror. Rathbone lunged, hero that he was, but Booth's dagger flashed, slicing deep into the major's arm, nearly severing it. With a curse, Booth vaulted over the balustrade, 12 feet to the stage below. His boot snagged on a draped flag, and agony shot through his left leg as the fibula snapped like dry kindling. The crowd gasped, some thought it part of the show. This wild-eyed actor in black, limping across the boards. But his cry shattered the illusion. Sic semper tyrannis, thus always to tyrants, Virginia's ancient motto, hurled like a vow. He vanished through the wings, into the night, mounting his waiting mare and galloping into the dark streets. Pain be damned. Across the city, the plot's other blade struck wild. Powell, that brute with the gentle alias Pain, hammered on Seward's door, claiming a false errand. The secretary lay abed, his face swathed in bandages from a recent carriage spill. Powell burst in, knife gleaming, slashing at Seward's throat and face 13 wounds, they said later. A metal neck brace, meant to steady the broken man's head, twisted the blade and saved his life. Seward's son and a brave nurse fell wounded too, but Powell fled into the shadows, abandoned by the skittish herald. And Atzerodt, the would-be slayer of Johnson, drank himself into a stupor at a bar instead, his nerve dissolving like mist. One blow landed true. The rest glanced off fate's cruel armor. They carried Lincoln from the theater, a procession of horror across 10th Street to the Peterson House, a plain brick boarding house, its gas lamps flickering like dying fireflies. Laid diagonally across a spare room's too-short bed to fit his 6'4" frame, he lingered in twilight. Young Dr. Charles Leal, fresh from the audience and the battlefields, had been first on the scene, feeling the president's pulse weaken, cradling his shattered head. Now, a parade of doctors came. Surgeon General Joseph Barnes, who probed the wound with ungentle fingers, declaring the Derringer ball lodged deep behind Lincoln's right eye, an impossible surgery in that gaslit age. Mary Todd wailed in the hall, her world unraveling. Son Robert arrived, pale as death, while cabinet ghosts like Edwin Stanton kept vigil. All through the night, Lincoln's chest rose and fell in shallow defiance, his face serene. They whispered, as if dreaming of a mended nation. At 7:22 a.m., with the first light of Easter Sunday creeping in, his great heart stuttered to a stop. Stanton, voice thick with grief, bowed his head. Now he belongs to the ages. Word spread like wildfire through a parched land. Bells tolled, black crepe draped the White House, and a stunned nation reeled. Booth, meanwhile, rode hard into Maryland's tangled woods, Harold at his side like a faithful hound. Sympathizers sheltered them, doctors who bound Booth's throbbing leg, farmers who turned blind eyes. They forded the Potomac under moonless skies, slipping into Virginia's pine barrens, where whispers of rebel ghosts still lingered. Booth scribbled in a pocket diary, his words a fevered rant. Hatred for the black Republican Lincoln, dreams of glory twisted into delusion. 12 days they evaded the hunters, Union cavalry, detectives, even freed black scouts who knew every hidden trail. It ended at dawn on April 26, in a weathered tobacco barn on the Garrett Farm near Port Royal, Virginia. The 16th New York Cavalry surrounded them, flames licking the walls as Booth refused to yield. Harold surrendered, begging mercy. Booth, defiant to the last, clutched his rifle inside. Through a crack in the barn slats, Sergeant Boston Corbett, a pious oddity who once cut off his own hand to curb sinful urges, took aim. His bullet tore through Booth's neck, dropping him in a heap. As the actor lay dying on the dew-kissed ground, he murmured, "Tell my mother I die for my country," then gazed at his trembling hands. Useless, useless. By sunrise, the man who'd slain a president was gone, his body slung over a horse like so much refuse. Justice came swift and merciless. The conspirators were rounded up. Mary Surratt from her boarding house, her face a mask of bewildered denial. Powell, the beast, dragged from a swamp hideout. Atzerodt, spilling secrets in his terror. And the rest, a military tribunal, stern as Old Testament judges, convened in a sweltering penitentiary. No appeals, no juries of peers, just the weight of a nation's fury. On July 7, under a drizzling sky, 4 swung from the gallows. Surratt, the landlady whose guilt whispers debate to this day. Powell, hooded and silent. Harold, sniveling to the end. Atzerodt, whose cowardice doomed them all. Others rotted in cells. Dr. Samuel Mudd, who mended Booth's leg and paid with years of chains. Spangler, the unwitting stagehand. The trials were a spectacle, a purge, but they couldn't mend the tear in America's soul. And so, the great emancipator's journey home became a river of tears. His body, embalmed and draped in flags, lay in state under the Capitol's dome, then boarded a funeral train, a black draped iron serpent, winding 1,654 miles through the heartland, from Washington to Baltimore, Harrisburg, Philadelphia's Independence Hall, New York's thronged streets, up to Albany and Buffalo, west to Cleveland, Columbus, Indianapolis, Chicago's windswept piers, and finally Springfield's quiet embrace. At every stop, millions lined the tracks, farmers, freedmen, widows in black, flinging flowers, sobbing as if for their own fathers. He was buried on May 4 inches, a hillside tomb, the railside mourners a testament to the man who'd bound wounds deeper than any bullet. In the end, Booth's blade didn't shatter the Union. It forged Lincoln into a saint, hardened the North's hand in Reconstruction, and left scars that time alone couldn't fade. Andrew Johnson stepped into the Oval Office, a tailor's son from Tennessee, his leniency toward the South sparking firestorms in Congress that nearly burned him from power. The nation, reborn in blood, staggered forward. But on that spring night in Ford's Theater, when the laugh lines turned to screams, a light went out, and America learned how fragile even giants can be. Stay connected to this channel to get more historical stories in American history.